Get ready to start on a shelving unit for in the house, and I need 3 shelves 8 feet long by about 14 inches wide. I'm going to use the Pecan, and it's number 2 grade at best, so there's going to be a lot of weight. So I'm going to get about twice as many boards as I need and do a rough plane, and then cut out the bad parts and glue them together, and hopefully I'll have enough to make 3 relatively flat boards 8 feet long by about 14 inches wide. So I spared you the boredom of watching me run these through the planer over and over again, but I ended up with 3 pretty nice boards. They're about 11 inches wide by the time I straighten the edges, and they're close to 8 feet long. So these will be my 3 shelves. The top one I'm going to make wider by 1 inch with a piece of this. The second one I'm going to make it 2 inches wider, and the third one I'm going to make 3 inches wider. So I have enough material here. It's just a matter of cutting it up and straightening the edge and gluing them. So I'll probably spare you that boredom also. Shelf number 1 glued up. And the great thing about yellow glue is the dry time. I'm going to unclamp it. It's been 4 hours. I'm going to unclamp it and do shelf number 2. Third shelf is glued up this morning. Now, I haven't been running these through my joiner. They're just too big and awkward for my 6-inch. I end up doing more harm than good when I try to run a long board through that short planer. What I do is measure the width of the board, and it varies because these are rough cut, and I try to cut off like 1/8 of an inch with the table saw. I'm lucky enough to have a full-size table saw with a long fence. And the rip won't be straight because the part of the board rubbing on the fence is not straight, but it's straighter than it used to be. So then you flip it over and you put the part you just cut against the fence, and you cut maybe another 1/8 or 1/16 off, and that is even straighter than the first cut. And you do that 2 or 3 times, maybe 4 times, and when you get a cut where the board follows the fence all the way from one end to the other without bowing in or out, then the part you just sawed is straight. So I made a scale drawing of the legs, the stands for the shelf. It's going to be I call it painter scaffolding, but I don't know where that word came from. Basically a tall skinny sawhorse with of course the top, and then 2 more pieces. And from the get-go I had in my mind using old cypress, which is I have a lot. It's very rustic and knotty and stuff, but I'm thinking if I have one like this and one like this, and then another crossbar and another crossbar, and the bar's going this way, that it's just going to look too heavy. Cypress is not very strong. I can't cut it real thin or the joints won't be strong. So I'm back to using Pecan, and it'll be a much lighter cross section, more like this, maybe even a little smaller. So first thing is to plane up a bunch of Pecan. So plane the first handful of boards. I've got plenty. I could just keep planing forever, but I'm ready to start. This is one of the Pecan boards that looks like oak, and I'm sure it's Pecan because it came from the same tree as far as I know, unless the lumber mill switched them up. But I've had a handful of these. This one planed to 7/8, so I'm going to go ahead and make the legs out of this. I can get 8 legs out of this one board, and all of the cross beams and everything else, these plane down to 3/4. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to try to get 8 matching boards, about 38 by about 1.5, 1 3/4. So I got 8 legs and a couple of extras to practice on. Okay, so I got a look that I like. These are at 15 degrees from horizontal, and there'll be a shelf about here and about here. So these will be notched in to the verticals, some sort of joint, and then between the 2 stands, between the 2 A-frames, they'll be canted in a little bit. I'll have something like this. Of course, it'll be going the opposite direction. So I want to cut these 4 joints. I have to do 4 sets, so it's worth my trouble to make some sort of jig, and I'll use the router. So where I am right now is I cut these, and I'm going to screw these down to the table, and that way I can clamp these, and I can get them all the same. I can get all 4 pairs the same if I make the router guide and attach it to this also. Still working out a little bit how to do the top joint, but I've cut them extra long, so I guess the next step will be to get the top joint. Probably have to cut that 15-degree angle on those. So I set up my incrementer guide, which I don't use very often because I don't really like it, but it does turn far, so I have it set on 75, which is the complement of 15, and I have a pencil mark here. So if I put all the boards in here till the bottom is on the pencil mark and clamp them tight and run them through the saw, all 8 of them should have the same cut on the top. So to make the complementary cut on the top, I got the miter gauge set at 15, and I got a stop block. So all I have to do is slide them till they hit the stop block and hold them tight, and I'm cutting just a teeny bit, so I don't even have to clamp them. I can just hold these. Okay, so far I have all my legs cut to width and thickness, and I have this jig screwed down to the table so that if I take a board, a leg, and slide it till it hits here and clamp it, and slide the other one till it hits here and clamp it, they're all going to be very close to exactly the same position in regards to the template. So now I need to add what I need to add to guide the router to cut the joints for this cross member and this cross member. Alright, well, my little jig got real complicated and ugly all of a sudden. But basically, these particle boards are here to hold the 2 legs in the right position. And then I have a guide for the router. It's above this, so I'll be able to slide these legs out and slide a new leg in. And here's the other guide for the router. And I have a 3/4 bit on the router, so I'm going to cut a 3/4 pass, and then I'm going to drop this 1/2 inch spacer. So the total will be 1 1/4, which is So the next question will be, can I get this pair out and get another pair in, and will it fit? Well, it may be ugly, but it works. I've been clamping an extra piece of scrap on the outside so when the router breaks through it doesn't chip. I don't need it on this side because the bit cuts into the wood, but on this side it would be cutting out, so it would want to splinter. I do one top and bottom. We just finished the last set, 404, and nothing bad happened. So to put the cross members in, I had to adjust the template a little bit. I got rid of the top half of this one, and I cut a slot out of that one. And I'm going to cut all of them the same. Once I get one to fit, because I'm using this template, I can cut 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 of each kind. So I got my 4 cross pieces for the bottom cut and one's for the top cut. They're a little bit tight width-wise, so I can plane each one with the hand plane to make them fit snug. And they're proud, which was the intention. So I need to cut a chunk of wood off the back this much to make it sit flat. So I very carefully marked it with a pencil so I know where to cut it and I know how deep to cut it. So I use the same gauge. To set the height of the blade, and I use my pencil mark to set the fence. I'm going to remove the extra with just a regular blade and the table saw such a little bit, and I'll flip it around, do the other side, and I'll do all 4 of the bottom ones, and I'll check the top one because it may be a little bit different, but the 4 bottom ones I'm going to go ahead and finish up. Okay, these are my 4 bottom stretchers, I think would be the right term. And I've got them clamped together, lined up. And this is the center line. I have an offset. I'm going to route a groove right down the center of the inside face. And that will be the joint to accept the support that holds up the shelf. So I'm going to just do one pass right down the middle with a 1/2 inch bit. Be a done deal.
I grabbed what I thought was a sharp bit, but it was very unsharp, and I really had to shove it through there and left a burnt mess on both sides. I probably need to throw away half of my router bits.
Yeah, I made a serious math error on cutting this groove. It's not in the middle. The first groove is not in the middle, so either I was going to have my support not centered, or I was going to throw all these boards away and do it over, or I decided to put another groove off center the other way, and I'm going to have 2 shelf supports side by side to compensate for my error. Now hopefully I can take the 4 stringers up top and match this and get those equally wrong together at the same time. So I think it's time to put the legs together with screws, no glue yet. I found my smallest functioning plug cutter, and that's what size bit I'll use to recess the screw. And we'll put 1, 2, 3, 4 screws in each leg and stand them up.
This pecan is really hard and maybe a little bit brittle, so I'm pre-drilling all the screw holes and coating the screws with just a little wax, just to kind of prevent splitting, making them going a little bit easier.
So I think my next step is to glue these tops together. I'm sure I'll put a screw in them later on, but it's hard clamping sloping things. So I cut up a bunch of scrap and made these little clamp assisters. So if you clamp one there and one there, and then you put the C-clamp here, you have a nice square surface to clamp against where the clamp won't slip off. And then you can pull them up tight. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and glue them all. That's my next step. I'm going to go ahead and glue them all. Now I don't want the frames to stand up straight. I want them leaning in a little bit. And I just took the adjustable square and said arbitrarily, that's what I want. So this is the angle I want it to lean in at. And if I put it over here, and put my speed square against it and read the angle, for like 2.5 degrees, or let's go 3 degrees. So I'm going to have to cut tops off of these at 3 degrees so that they'll be horizontal with the shelf. So here's my setup to cut the tops. I got the miter saw at 15 degrees because that's the angle of the legs. I got the saw blade tilted at 3 degrees, and I'm going to slide them until they touch this little piece of scrap. That's my reference, so I can get them all the same across here. Let's see how that works. All right, definitely needs a couple more degrees. I'm going to cut them again with, that was 3, I think I'll go with 5. Yesterday I went ahead and glued the stretchers in place, and this morning I spent some time sanding on them. the more you sand before you put everything together, the easier it is. So I got the frames all sanded down to 150. I established an arbitrary width just by looking at it, and I prepared a bunch of stock for these cross pieces. It's 1.25 inches by 3/4, and I ran them through the belt sander and got them all cleaned up, and I'm going to cut them to length with a 5-degree angle on each end, because that's my angle of choice for the ends. And then I'll have to cut these little notches to make them fit in these little grooves. And I might be through with these things today. So again, using the Incra bevel gauge, and this time I was able to use the little built-in stop. I've got the 4 top stretchers cut with a 5-degree angle on both sides, and they should be exactly the same length. So now I need to cut the notch on each end.
When I'm cutting little joints or notches, my best luck comes when I take scraps cut from these boards so they're exact the right cross sections, and just play with the saw until I get what fits, and then you're good to go. You know, if it fits, if the scrap fits and it's from the same board, you'll know the final fit will be good.
So the first pair is in place, and I'm kind of glad I screwed up that joint, because I think it looks better with 2 side by side than it would have looked with just 1 in the middle. Now I got to get the bottom ones right. That's the next step. So 3 shelves I ripped to final width, and I'm going to run them through the planer again. I don't want to remove much, just get the glue lines straightened out. Maybe probably less than a 1/16, hopefully. Okay, 3 shelves have been ripped to width and run through the planer. They're smooth. Just need some final sanding and we can put a finish on them. So yesterday I glued these twin boards in, and this morning I sanded the mess and drilled and added screws here, and screws here. But a funny thing is going on. These bottom 2 brackets are level. I screwed a top on, and it is way not level. Well, I say way, it's about a 1/4 inch off. I don't know what the heck happened. So I've got it screwed on, not glued on. I can take it off. I'll have to trim this and try to get that angle right again. Dang it. Okay, that was easy. I just trimmed it with the table saw. So now I'm at 37 and 3/8, and what I want is to be 35 and 1/8. So I need to remove 2 1/4 from the bottom of the legs. I knew the legs were long. I just kind of cut them long to make sure I'd have enough. So I need to remove 2 1/4. I cut this little block 2 1/4. I'm going to scribe each leg here, and I think I can get the right angle on the table saw where this will be fairly easy.
Okay, now watch closely. I hope you're watching. I hope you're getting this before it actually happens. Because the guy that was running the saw did not get it until after it happened. Yeah, so now he's getting it. Now he's got it. Cut the angle on the leg 100% upside down backwards. Like, so stupid. Ray Charles could have seen this. I have no idea what the guy was thinking. But
Something just went horribly wrong.
so the old guy got it figured out. Cutting on them again. So now our tabletop, our shelf top, which we were shooting for to be 36 inches off the floor, will now be 35 and 5/8. Not the end of the world, but a little embarrassing.
Second frame is the same thing. The 2 bottom shelves are level, but the top is not. But easy enough to straighten up. I just don't quite understand why. One of the shelf boards had some pretty serious cracks or splits. It went all the way through. So I taped the back real well, and I've been filling them with epoxy. So this is the second day, so now I have hardened epoxy in there. I can go ahead and fill them all the way to the top now. I don't have to worry about it leaking through. Okay, the stands have 2 coats of varnish, and I'm calling it good. And I'm going to set them out here when the sun comes out in a little bit, we can kind of harden that varnish up a little bit before we bring them inside. So on the shelves, I belt sanded down all the extra epoxy that I used to fill up the cracks and holes, and I sanded or planed the edge, cut them to length, and put a little 1/8 inch round over bit in the router, rounded all the edges. So today a little finish sanding and we'll start putting varnish on. So my varnish of choice for flat surfaces, especially working surfaces like a tabletop or these shelves, is floor varnish. It builds up quick, it's high solids, and it levels really well. And that's what it's kind of formulated for, is leveling out. And it dries quick, so it's got some good traits. Now for vertical surfaces, it's not worth a crap because it's really runny. For these shelves and tabletops, that's what I use, is floor varnish. Okay, first coat on the 3 shelves. Hopefully it'll dry enough today where I can flip them and put a coat on the bottom.
Another reason I'm a fan of using floor varnish, it dries so fast. So I put my first coat this morning before the sun came over the trees, and then I got home around 11 and they were dry enough to flip, and then about 1 I flipped them again, and now I have 2 coats on the finished side, so they're they're done. Okay, I realize I have no video on this, but I plugged all the screw holes with a contrasting wood plug, sanded them smooth. Same day as varnish, they're in the house. Varnish is not real hard yet. We're not going to put anything on the shelves, but they're not smelling bad. So happy wife, good project. Thanks for watching.